Stories, fables, ghostly tales.
Welcome, listeners. It's your remastered old-time Radio Monday, and today I came home to no power in my house due to roadworks taking place a little way away from me, which, was absolutely pleasant. 3 hours later of me working on the house, fixing things and getting to parts of the house that I never got to before due to lack of time. So we spend those 3 hours without power and dedicated to making use of the time. Also, like a bit of twist in a short story, I went to order some food online, only to have the power come on just as I ordered, which means I was so close to eating a nice home-cooked meal. Goodness, one of those days, unfortunately, and truly a first world problem, as I'm pressed for time and concerned that my power could sneak away again. I'll keep today's intro short. This episode is the first time that Sherlock Holmes meets Moriarty, his nemesis, his challenger, his arch-rival. Yes, this is where it all begins, at least in this series, so I hope you love it. Now, this was a heavily damaged episode that I've managed to repair as always, but there will be some bumps, so join me for these bumps, mates, because this episode is such a classic. I will catch you all Wednesday, where hopefully I'm back to normal. Enjoy, my lovely listeners.
And now I'm certain our good friend Dr. Watson's waiting for us. Let's go in and join him.
Come in. Ah, there you are, Mr. Bartell. Punctual to the minute, as always.
Well, this is one doctor's appointment I'm eager to keep.
Nice of you to say so, my boy. Draw up your usual chair and make yourself comfortable.
Thanks. Well, Doctor, today's April the 1st. Did anyone try and play any jokes on you?
Yes, you did, Mr. Bartell, but I'm happy to say that nobody caught me. Not as in the story that I'm telling you tonight, but an April Fool's Day prank certainly scored a bullseye.
I see you have the dispatch box out again, Doctor. Been refreshing your memory?
Yes, I have to tell. And when I tell you the adventure took place in 1881, I think you'll agree that after such a lapse of time, a man can hardly rely on memory alone.
1881? Say, Doctor, tonight's adventure must have been one of the really early ones.
Yes, it was indeed. In fact, to be exact, it took place only a little while after Sherlock Holmes and I had first met and had taken up lodgings together.
How was the great detective in those early days?
Profound mystery to me, Mr. Bartell. To give you an example, my boy, I'd shared on Baker Street lodgings with him for over a month before I was even certain of his profession, the knowledge of which I learnt to my awe and astonishment when our first adventure together took place.
Oh, that was the one you called a study in scarlet, wasn't it, Doctor?
That's right, Mr. Bartell. What a memory you got, study in scarlet. But even after that adventure, I found myself wondering at times what I had let myself in for, sharing lodgings with such a strange companion. It was in one of those moods of doubt and confusion that my story begins. Late one March evening, I found myself in the neighborhood of Piccadilly Circus. It was cold, and a steady drizzle of rain had dampened my spirits. I thought that a glass of wine and the sound of music would put me in a better mood, and so, Mr. Bartell, I entered the Criterion restaurant. As I sat with a glass of rare vintage port at my elbow, the orchestra playing a dreamy Strauss waltz in the background, I couldn't help thinking of the last time that I'd been there. It was the night I met a young medical student by the name of Stamford. He was the man who first introduced me to Sherlock Holmes. Suddenly, I felt a clap on my shoulder. I turned, and to my amazement, once again young Stamford was standing before me.
Watson, or should I say Dr. Watson, how are you, my dear chap?
Hello, Stamford. Come and sit down.
Thanks. I'm to see that you're not holding any grudge against me.
Why on earth should I do that?
For introducing you to Sherlock Holmes. I've reproached myself ever since. I think he's as mad as a
Not
hat.
at all. He may be eccentric. In fact, I'll admit that he is eccentric, but he's an extraordinarily interesting fellow. He'll make a great name for himself as a private detective one of these days. You'll see if I'm not right, Stamford.
I saw something about him in the paper the other day.
Yes, I expect that was the Lauriston Gardens affair, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
He's a brilliant man, Stamford. Quite brilliant. So I must admit he's difficult at times. He works like a fiend as a rule, but occasionally a reaction sets in for days at a time. He'll lie on our sofa, hardly uttering a word or moving a muscle from morning to night. Pressing, I must say.
I think he takes himself too seriously.
Yes, perhaps you're right.
How would you like to join in a little plot?
Potter. against Holmes?
Yes, just a rag, you know. We thought it'd be rather fun.
We?
Murphy and I, we were just talking about it. I'll call him over. Murphy?
Murphy, I've seen him before somewhere, haven't I?
I'm sure you must have done. He's been round at the hospital, and any time you go into the British Museum, you'll find him there. Nice fella, but dull, sniffly dull.
Yes, Stamford.
Oh, this is a friend of mine, John Watson. This is James Murphy.
I think I've seen you at the hospital.
And I know I've seen you, Dr. Watson.
Oh, sit down and come and join us, won't you?
Oh, thank you very much.
I was just telling Watson about our little plot.
Oh, you mean about Sherlock Holmes?
Now, look here. I'd like you fellows to realize that Holmes is a very good friend of mine.
Oh, don't worry, Watson. This is all in good fun. Don't you realize what date is tomorrow?
1st of April, isn't it?
Yes, April Fool's Day.
Oh, now I see. You're going to play an April Fool's Day joke on Holmes.
Yes, that's our plan.
Well, it's hardly our plan, Stamford. It's really Lady Anne Partington's idea. You see, Holmes was very rude to her when she visited the hospital recently, and she wants to, take him down a peg or two.
Sounds innocent enough, but I must say he's inclined to be rather arrogant at times. Well, what's the plan?
Well, we'll need your help, Watson. You must be careful not to give the joke away. I'll bet you a $5 that Holmes falls for the whole story, hook, line, and sinker. Now, here's exactly what we're planning to do. Lady Anne is going to call on Holmes at Baker Street in the morning.
I'm very flattered that you called to see me in my professional capacity.
Surely, my dear man, you didn't think this was a social call. You were much too rude to me at the hospital the other day for that.
That was the point I was trying to make. Please sit down, won't you?
Take this chair, won't you, Lady Anne? It's by far the most comfortable chair in the room.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Watson.
And now, what can I do to help you?
You've heard of the Elphinstone Emerald.
Oh, yes, indeed. A magnificent stone of very considerable value. An heirloom in your family, I believe.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. I keep it in a wall safe in my bedroom. This morning, when I had occasion to go to the safe, I discovered that the emerald had been stolen.
Stolen? Scott, shocking business. Of course, you want Mr. Holmes to recover it for you.
A remarkable deduction, my dear doctor. Lady Anne, when you opened the safe, did you observe any signs of it having been tampered with?
Oh, I think it's rather stupid to sit and answer questions here in Baker Street. Why don't you come to my house in Cavendish Square and examine the safe for yourself? You are a detective, aren't you?
Lady Anne, just now you accused me of rudeness. I assure you that mine at least was unintentional.
Oh, come, Holmes. Don't be so touchy.
I can promise you a substantial fee, Mr. Holmes.
I'm a struggling practitioner in a new profession, eh? My poverty, but not my will, consents.
I pay thy poverty, and not thy will. You see, I can quote my Shakespeare, too, Mr. Holmes. My carriage is waiting, gentlemen. Let's drive over to Cavendish Square at once, shall we? This is the wall safe, Mr. Holmes.
Not too difficult a safe to crack for an expert. You placed the emerald in it last night, you say?
Yes, when I went to bed. And this morning, it had gone.
Well, surely, Holmes, this is a good occasion to use that magnifying glass that you're always fitting about.
An excellent occasion, my dear doctor. That's why I brought it with me. It's very interesting.
What is it?
This safe was opened by an expert. There isn't a sign of its having been forced. Hello.
What have you discovered?
There was a peculiar tarnish on the steel knob. It was obviously handled by someone whose fingers are habitually stained with chemicals.
Amazing, Holmes.
Elementary, my dear doctor. Where does that door lead to?
My boudoir.
I should like to examine it if I may.
Oh, but of course.
Thank you, Lady Anne.
Dr. Watson, this is the most beautiful April Fool's Day fraud I've ever
I
played.
must say, Murphy was right. He has fallen for it. Hook, line, and sinker. Just the same, I'm beginning to feel guilty. I can't help feeling a bit disloyal.
Oh, nonsense, it's all in fun.
Are Stamford and Mr. Murphy listening?
Yes, they're next door in my drawing room. I'm sure their ears are positively glued to the keyhole.
Well, I do hope Holmes won't be angry with me.
Here he comes.
Nothing of any interest in there. The windows haven't been tampered with. We may presume, therefore, that the thief did not enter by an upstairs window. Lady Anne.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
This room has not been touched since you discovered your loss?
Oh, no. I told the servants to leave it exactly as it was while I came to fetch you.
Splendid. Deep pile carpet, eh? Could be better. The thief was a tall man with a long stride.
Oh, come, Holmes. I know your methods, but there aren't any footprints on this carpet that you can identify, even with your magnifying
My
glass.
dear doctor, I've studied many crimes, and I've never seen one yet that was committed by a flying creature. As long as a criminal remains on his two legs, there must be some trifling displacement to be detected by a keen observer. I assure you that the marks on this carpet indicate that the thief was a tall man with a long stride. Traces of tobacco ash. Pipe tobacco. Stag tobacco, the
Sells at 4p an ounce.
Oh, now, really, Mr. Holmes, how can you possibly identify an individual tobacco?
Oh, it's a hobby of mine. In fact, I've even written a monograph on the subject. Now, one more look at the safe itself. Hello. What this powder does here? What? It's rosin. Trace of rosin. Lady Anne, I suggest that you get in touch with Scotland Yard at once.
You mean that you've solved it, Holmes?
I mean, my dear doctor, that I can give you a reasonably complete picture of the thief, and that picture is so individual that I'd be surprised if it would fit more than one man in London.
Why, this is pure magic, Mr. Holmes. Please describe him to me.
Well, he's a tall man. The width of his stride indicates that, and he's thin.
What enables you to tell that, Holmes?
His footprints have made a remarkably light indentation on the nap of the carpet. Our thief dabbles extensively in chemicals, as indicated by the tarnishing of the knob on the safe, and the traces of rosin would suggest that he plays the violin also. He smokes shag tobacco, has a great practical knowledge of the ways of combination locks, and he's obviously in close contact with the criminal classes.
How do you know that, Mr. Holmes?
Well, he wouldn't steal a famous stone unless he knew how to dispose of it through some trustworthy fence.
Yes, it's a very comprehensive picture, Holmes. I almost feel as if I knew the chap.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm sure there's only one man in London, and it shouldn't be hard to trace him.
I agree entirely, Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson, I think the joke has gone far enough.
Joke? What do you mean?
You're quite right, Holmes, in saying there's only one such man in London. You've just given a perfect description of yourself.
April Fool. Dr. Stamford, Mr. Murphy, you can come in now.
April Fool, Holmes.
April Fool.
April Fool.
Come along here, into the drawing room, everyone. Let us drink a glass of wine to Mr. Holmes, who has so graciously forgiven us for the little trick we played on him. And also to Dr. Stamford, who thought of the whole idea.
No hard feelings, Holmes.
Oh, no, Doctor. Oh, it was a rather embarrassing experience.
When Murphy told me about the plan, I just couldn't resist joining him.
Ah, here you are, Holmes. Here's a drink.
Thank you, Stamford.
You know Murphy, don't you?
No, I don't think we've met. How do you do, sir?
How do you do, Holmes? How did you like the little game we played on you?
It was rather a salutary experience. I suppose you gave them all the details to build up the picture of me, eh, Doctor?
Yes, I did, Holmes, and knowing some of your methods, we tried to plant every clue that you'd pick up.
Very neat job, too, and incidentally, a perfect example of the dangers of deductions based on purely circumstantial evidence. I shall profit from this little lesson.
I must say it was worth a fortune in emeralds to see your face, Holmes, when you realized what you'd done.
Well, the joke's over now. By the way, where is Lady Anne?
I believe she said she was going to fetch the Elphinstone emerald. She thought you might be interested in seeing it.
She probably feels the sight of it salve my wounded vanity.
Oh, here she comes now.
Mr. Holmes! Mr. Holmes!
Great Scott, what's wrong?
What's happened, Lady Anne?
The emerald, it's not where I hid it. This time it's really stolen.
Well, Dr. Watson, your April Fool Day plot kind of backfired on you, didn't it?
Yes, Mr. Bartell, it was a perfect example of the biter bit.
Well, what happened next? I suppose Sherlock Holmes went into action once again.
That's fair, Mr. Bartell, and it gladdened my heart to see the change in the fella. I confess I'd felt rather ashamed of my part in the prank, for I could see that Holmes's pride had been hurt. But now, with a definite crime before him, the difference was amazing. He suddenly became a dynamo, galvanized into action as he stood there, firing questions at the other members.
Lady Anne, you beside yourself knew of this fresh hiding place.
Both Murphy and I did.
Yes. After we left our deliberate clues on the safe, we went with Lady Anne and saw her secrete the emerald in the top drawer of her dressing table.
We thought it would be all right there. After all, as soon as the joke was over, I was going to put it back in the safe.
Now, I think our wisest plan before we question the servants would be for each one of you who were in this April Fool's Day prank to submit to being searched.
Holmes, surely you don't suggest that any one of us took the emerald?
No, Stamford, I don't. But if any one of you four are not guilty, this will be a splendid way of proving your innocence.
I say, steady, Holmes. You're not suggesting that Lady Anne stole her own emeralds, are you?
Are you, Mr. Holmes?
I'm suggesting nothing, but I may point out that the recent vogue for the insurance companies has provided another interesting motive for these so-called thefts.
I resent your insinuation. It's outrageous.
Lady Anne, if I'm to recover your emerald, I must at least consider every possibility. The search is the most immediate practical action. Perhaps you'll retire into the next room while I persuade these gentlemen to submit to being searched.
Very well, but But I think you're in danger of making a fool of yourself once again.
No, wait, don't go, Lady Anne. The search won't be necessary.
What do you mean, Murphy?
I must throw myself on your mercy, Lady Anne. I confess that I stole the emerald.
Murphy!
After you put it in the drawer, Lady Anne, I slipped back into the room and took it out.
Murphy, that's a criminal action.
I know it, but I'm poor. I need money desperately for my mathematical research. I knew the emerald was priceless, and I couldn't resist the temptation to take advantage of a joke. Here, Lady Anne, here's the stone, and please don't prosecute me. Please don't. It'd be my ruin.
May I examine the emerald, Lady Anne? Thank you.
Well, Mr. Murphy, I won't pretend that I'm not deeply shocked. I must ask you to leave my house.
But you won't prosecute me, will you? It was a moment's temptation.
No, I won't prosecute you.
Holmes? What are you doing with the emerald?
Well, knowing something of the deceptive ways of thieves, I came on this case fully prepared to test the emerald when I found it. Now, a drop of this acid on this vial, so...
Mr. Holmes, what are you doing? You'll injure the stone.
No, not if it's a true emerald. Look at that.
Good Lord, the acid's eating to the stone as if it was sugar.
Then that means...
It means, Lady Anne, that Mr. Murphy has just imperiled his honor and his freedom to steal a singularly beautiful fake.
Mr. Holmes, this joke has turned into a nightmare. Is there no way of recovering my emerald?
I hope so, Lady Anne. I've been taking steps in their logical order. The servants have all been questioned. We've searched Mr. Stamford and Mr. Murphy.
Yes, most humiliating experience. Made me feel like a criminal.
Well, personally, I was only too thankful to submit to a search this time. I knew I had nothing to worry about.
And you yourself, Lady Anne, you consented to being searched by the police matron that Holmes sent for?
Only because he threatened to send for the police if I didn't. But distasteful though it was, I'd rather endure that than have this story on the front pages of the newspapers.
And in spite of all these rather unfriendly proceedings, we've got exactly nowhere as regards finding the emerald.
No, Stamford, but we have at least eliminated the possibility that the thief is secreting the jewel on his person.
Still somewhere in these two rooms, eh, Holmes?
I think so, though there is one remaining possibility.
And that is?
That the fake stone was substituted for the real emerald sometime before all of you engineered your April Fool's Day joke.
Oh, no, Mr. Holmes, that's not possible. I know it was the genuine emerald I took out of the safe this morning.
How can you be sure? The substitute was an excellent imitation. Without a chemical test such as I performed, it would be hard to be certain.
I can tell you why I'm certain. Last night, Papa came to dinner and brought a Mr. Vanderleider of Amsterdam. He examined the stone, and you'll agree that a jewel expert like that couldn't be fooled.
That's true, Lady Anne. And what did you do with the emerald after Mr. Vanderleider left?
I locked it in my safe and went to bed.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't unlock the safe again until Dr. Stamford and Mr. Murphy came here this morning.
That settles it then. The real emerald is still hidden somewhere in these two rooms.
But where? That's the question.
I must say it's completely mystifying.
Well, let's go back to what we were all doing at the exact moment you came into the room, Lady Anne, and informed us of the loss of your stone. Now, we were...
We were drinking a toast to you and...
That's it.
Lady Anne, hard thinking is, well, it's thirsty work.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me get you something. A glass of port, perhaps.
No, thank you, but I observe that you have a remarkably comprehensive assortment of liqueurs. I wonder if I might have a glass of creme de menthe.
Oh, of course. I'll get it for you.
Creme de menthe in the middle of the day, Holmes.
I knew you were eccentric, but this really takes...
This bottle, it clinged as I picked it up.
I thought it might, Lady Anne.
There's something inside it.
Allow me, madam. Thank you. I'm sure you won't mind if I waste this liqueur on the aspidestra.
No, of course not.
So... Lady Anne, allow me to restore to you the Elphinstone Emerald.
Great Scott.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
Ingenious. The one safe hiding place in the room. Where could a green gem be more effectively hidden than in a bottle of green liqueur?
But who stole it? Who substituted the fake stone?
Frankly, I don't care. The gem is restored. That's all that matters. I prefer not to go to court. Neither you nor I, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, would show up in the best of lights. And my father would disapprove of this whole affair, I'm afraid.
Just as you wish, Lady Anne. In either case, I shall expect your check for my services in due course.
Oh, well, here we are at the Criterion again, Stamford. Won't you come in and join us for lunch?
Thanks, Watson, but I'll keep the cab and go on. I actually have a patient this afternoon. A rare and delightful experience for a young doctor, as you probably know.
As rare and delightful as a client is for a young detective, eh, Stanford? I quite understand, and I'm correspondingly grateful to you for your profitable hopes.
I'm glad it was profitable for you. Personally, I feel pretty stupid about the whole thing. Well, goodbye.
Goodbye, old fella.
Goodbye. 39 Onslow Square, cabby.
You're remarkably quiet, Murphy.
Well, I'm afraid my conscience won't let me do much talking, Doctor. I'm heartily ashamed of myself. Well, thanks for the lift. I'll leave you chaps.
Oh, nonsense. You'll join us for lunch, Murphy.
But,
no buts about it. I insist. Come on.
Well, it's awfully nice of you.
Oh, come, Murphy. Any one of us can make a foolish mistake. It's just lucky that you didn't have to pay for yours.
Monsieur wishes a table.
Yes, for 3, please.
This way, monsieur. Does this table please you?
Excellent, thank you.
George, I'm as hungry as a hunter. How about you, Murphy?
No, I'm afraid I have very little appetite. This whole case has upset me dreadfully.
You mustn't take it so much to heart, Murphy. By the way, Doctor, I'd like to have your opinion on the case. Who do you think staged the theft of the emerald today?
Perfectly obvious to me. Lady Anne Partington did it herself to collect insurance money. If she hadn't, she'd have insisted on your finding the thief. But you needn't worry, old chap. You'll get your fee all right, I'm sure of that.
Oh, I'm not worrying about the fee. But I assure you, Lady Anne did not engineer that fraud today.
You mean it was Stafford?
Tell him who was responsible, my dear Murphy.
But how should I know?
Oh, come now, Murphy. Let's not fence any longer. You did an excellent job, a superlative job. I was almost sorry to spoil it for you.
I don't think I understand you, Holmes.
Oh, yes, you do, Murphy. You're a splendid actor, too. I was so deeply touched when you had apparently stolen a fake jewel, and all the time you knew that the real one was safely hidden in the bottle of creme de menthe. Be abstracted at your leisure. You scoundrel.
Holmes, do you mind telling me what's going on here? I'm completely and absolutely in the dark.
Surely it's obvious, my dear doctor. The imitation emerald was a brilliant copy.
What makes you so sure of that, my dear
Because
Holmes?
this April Fool's Day hoax was only conceived yesterday, or that is what you wish the others to believe. Such a superb paste gem could not have been made at such short notice. Therefore, it must have been prepared by someone who knew about the hoax before it was arranged. Now, my dear doctor, when Stamford told you about the plan last night, whose idea did he say it was?
He told me that it was Lady Anne Partington's plan.
Precisely. And yet Lady Anne referred to it today as Stamford's idea. Obviously, you, my dear Murphy, presented the plan to each as the notion of the other, and so only you could have arranged the real theft behind the hoax. I repeat, a splendid job.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. May I also compliment you on your cleverness in frustrating my plot?
Look here, what is all this? One of you's a criminal, the other's a detective. Yet you're throwing each other compliments as if you were in the same profession.
The dividing line between the criminal and the criminal investigator is thinner than you might imagine, my dear doctor.
How very true, my dear Holmes. Would you consider coming over to my side of the line? Together we'd make an unbeatable team.
Oh, you flatter me. Nevertheless, I must decline your offer, Mr. Murphy.
Oh, pity. On your side of the line, you'll never be a rich man. By the way, for your edification, my name is not Murphy, though Stamford insists on thinking it is.
Then what is your name, you scoundrel?
Your friend says the word scoundrel so much better than you, Doctor. My name is Murtry.
Oh, indeed. Spelled M-U-R-T-R-Y?
No. Dear me, I have so much trouble with my name. People will either misspell it or mispronounce it. I'm afraid I'll have to begin calling it the way it looks. M-O-R-I-A-R-T-Y. Moriarty.
Moriarty. I shall remember that name. I have a feeling we shall meet again.
I trust that we shall. You've won the first round, Sherlock Holmes, I admit that. But I believe that a return match is indicated.
I shall look forward to it, Moriarty. And now, Doctor, I can't stand your baleful glare any longer. Let's order lunch, shall we?
Doctor, that was a pretty hectic April Fool's Day.
Yes, it was. I never want to see another one exactly like it.
I don't blame you. You know, I'd sure hate to have someone come to my house and pull a trick like that on me.
Why, Mr. Bartell, do you have a precious emerald you fear may be stolen?
Are you kidding? I wouldn't know the difference between a precious emerald and a piece of green glass. But when it comes to rubies, now that's something else.
Oh, you would know a ruby when you saw it.
Sure,
Because a ruby has exactly the same color as a glass of Petri California port held up to the light.
Mr. Bartell, you can find more excuses for talking about Petri wine than any man in the entire world. Believe me.
Excuses, Doctor? I don't need an excuse to talk about Petri wine. Why, there's a wine that actually speaks for itself. If I may borrow a phrase from Shakespeare or somebody. There's another wine quite like Petri wine because only Petri wine is made by the Petri family. And the Petri family has been making wine for generations. They've been handing down from father to son, years and years of knowledge and experience of the fine art of turning luscious grapes into clear, fragrant, delicious wine. Yes, and because the making of Petri wine is a family affair, those letters P-E-T-R-I on a bottle of wine are the personal assurance of the Petri family that every drop of wine in that bottle is good wine. You never miss with a Petri wine because Petri took time to bring you good wine. Well, Dr. Watson, what's the prescription for next week's story?
Well, next week, Mr. Bartell, I'm going to tell you a rather unusual story. It concerns a series of strange disappearances and a murder with apparent reason, and yet it was a case that Sherlock Holmes solved without ever meeting any of the suspects. I call it the singular affair of the disappearing scientist.
Well, I'm sure we'll all want to hear that one, Doctor.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, before you go, Mr. Bartell, I want to urge our friends that will do all they can to save on the use of all wheat and rice products, and also fats and oils. There are millions of families literally starving to death in Europe and Asia. They're not being asked to give them our food. They're just being asked to take it easy on certain foods so that there will be some left for them to buy. I know there isn't one person listening to me tonight who would knowingly let anyone starve. And remember, unless you do help, thousands of little children will starve. So please, let's share a meal and save a life.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and was suggested by an incident in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story, A Study in Scarlet. Music is by Dean Fossler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. And now I'm sure our good friend Dr. Watson's expecting us. Let's go in and join. Good evening, Dr. Watson.
Good evening, Mr. Bartell.
All set for tonight's story?
Yes, my boy, I'm all set, as you put it. It began in Vienna in 1889. The old Vienna of bright lights, lovely ladies, and lilting music.
What were you and the great Sherlock Holmes doing there, Doctor?
Mr. Bartell, what were we doing there?
Yes, sir. Were you just taking a trip?
Oh, in those early days of our association, we didn't have either the time or the money for trips. No, we were in Vienna with the express command of the Emperor Franz Joseph. It was in October, I remember, that we arrived in the city, and for several days we were forced to cool our heels awaiting the imperial pleasure. And on one of those idle evenings, at the good services of our friend the Chief of Police, Count Frano, secured us an invitation to a resplendent ball that was being held at the palace of Princess Stephanie von Kram. It was an incredibly colorful spectacle, Mr. Bartell. A string orchestra high in the gallery of the palace ballroom played a haunting Strauss waltz, while on the floor below, the cream of Viennese aristocracy swayed and glided gaily to the lilting music. I can remember the picture so well, Mr. Bartell, that Holmes and I stood there talking to the Chief of Police, Count Frano.
A colorful scene, is it not, gentlemen?
By George, yes, Count Frano. It must be a real holiday for you and Mr. Holmes.
What makes you say that, Watson?
Well, it's hard to think of the criminal world when one looks at such a gathering.
And yet Count Frano knows as well as I do that the criminal is not confined to class or environment.
Indeed, no, Mr. Holmes. I can assure you that every guest here tonight has been scrutinized as he entered.
Yes, I imagine that many plainclothes men are present in this room now, aren't they, Count Frano?
Oh, yes. We take no chances.
I suppose you can't afford to. There's enough jewelry being worn here tonight for a king's ransom, I should say.
The waltz is finished. Now I can present you to our hostess, Princess von Kram. Stephanie, my pigeon.
My pigeon must know the princess pretty well.
Yes, I'm glad to see that in Vienna the profession of criminal detection carries no social stigma.
Allow me to present you Mr. Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, the Princess Stephanie von Kram.
I'm very honored
Your
to meet
Highness.
you, Your Highness.
I'm most happy to meet you, gentlemen. Permit me to introduce my protege, Janos Horvat, the Hungarian composer.
I do, sir.
This ball tonight, Mr. Holmes, will mark a rare occasion. A signal honor is to be conferred on Herr Horvath and myself before tonight is through. The next waltz is a new composition of his. Tonight will be its debut.
Indeed, how very interesting.
It is a great honor the princess has conferred on me. A new composition could not possibly be presented under more auspicious circumstances.
Count of Frana, you spoke of an honor in connection with yourself.
May I tell them our secret, Stephanie?
No, I will tell them myself, Anatole. After your waltz has been played, Janusz, and Anatole and I shall be the first to have the privilege of dancing to it, my father is to make a public announcement. He is to announce my engagement to Count Anatole Rafon.
Oh, indeed, my congratulations to you both. Very lucky fellow. Very lucky
Am I
fellow.
not the luckiest of men? Is she not exquisite? I, the gay man of Vienna, the cavalier who swore that no one woman would ever capture him. I confess it, gentlemen, I'm in love. Oh, but I pity you. Even the great waltzes of old Vienna could hardly be worthy of this moment.
Oh, Anatole, you are a born flatterer. Oh, come, the waltz is about to begin. I shall see you gentlemen later.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Wiedersehen.
Oh,
The orchestra is tuning up, Herr Horvath. I imagine this is a great moment for you.
A very frightening one, I assure you, my friend. In a few minutes I shall know whether my new work is to be crowned with success or failure.
Count of Frana is leading the princess to the center of the floor. The conductor is raising his battle.
This is your moment, Herr Horvath. Good luck.
Pray for me, gentlemen. Pray for me.
There they go, the princess and Count of Frana. They're starting the waltz.
Ah, they make a striking pair, don't they?
Here come the other couples out on the floor. Charming. Quite charming. It reminds me of... Great Scott, that was a revolver shot.
It's the princess. She's been shot. Come on, Watson. Out of the way, please. Out of the way. Count Rufano. What happens?
Stephanie, Dr. Watson, see what you can do for her.
Count of Frana, there's nothing I can do, I'm afraid. She was shot through the brain. She died instantly.
Stephanie is dead. Stop that devilish music! Lock all the doors! There's a murderer to be found!
Count Rufano, have you found any clues?
One of my men found a revolver. It'd been tossed into the earth of a potted palm.
May I see it, please?
Of course, here.
Rammed into the soft earth. Confound it. Count Rufano, your fiancée was an extremely beautiful woman. You must have had rivals.
Yes, several, but none of them are present tonight.
Who will inherit her estate?
A 6-month-old nephew.
Who's his guardian?
The Emperor Franz Joseph himself. No, Mr. Holmes, I know of no obvious motive for someone wishing poor Stephanie dead.
Well, perhaps it was a political crime. She was a wealthy aristocrat and a very prominent one.
Yes, it's very possible. Many nihilist assassins have been active in my country recently.
Meanwhile, we have a ballroom full of suspects waiting for us.
So I was just going to suggest we went back there. We can't find out very much by staying here in the library.
It's a delicate matter. Almost everyone present tonight is known to me personally.
May I suggest that you go back to the ballroom and have the male guests file past you? Detain for questioning anyone whose evening clothes do not fit perfectly.
Clothes don't fit? What's the cut of a man's clothes got to do with this?
Anyone invited to such a ball as this would naturally have his own tailor. I think, Count Rufano, if you found a man who had to hire his costume, he might be an imposter and may well prove to be your assassin.
Well, Mr. Holmes, your plan has not been effective so far. You find one Englishman who is unusually badly dressed, and what do we discover? He's an English milord whose luggage was lost on the train.
Yes, and the second suspect proved to be a perfectly respectable Viennese doctor whose nasty little child had taken the last-minute snip at his tail coat with a pair of scissors.
And the third was poor Horvath, the composer, who cannot yet afford a good dress suit, eh? Well, Count Rufano, why not have the next suspect shown in?
Yes, of course. Schober, bring in the next man.
Ja, Herr Count.
Kommen Sie herein, bitte.
Fine, but what a frightful-looking fellow.
Your name, please.
My name is Groening. What do you wish with me?
Gröning? Your name was not on the list of invitations.
One moment, please. Let me see your right hand, Herr Groening.
You have no right to touch me.
Where did you get these fresh earth stains? Your right thumb is pitted and the nail is full of dirt.
What does that poor policeman...
Not a short while ago, you tried to hide your revolver by ramming it into an earth-filled flower pot. Give me that revolver, please, Count Profano. It will be easy to compare the samples of earth.
It will not be necessary.
Well, you admit that you murdered the princess tonight, then?
Certainly, I admit it.
Why did you kill her?
She was an aristocrat. She was an oppressor of the poor. I'm glad I killed her. One day, I and my party will kill all of you filthy aristocrats.
Count Profano, put down that revolver.
Shoot him like the dark he is.
No, Count Profano. Even you can't take the law into your own hands.
Why do you not shoot me? I'm not afraid to die. Have him taken away, Schober.
Nehmt den Hund ins Gefängnis.
Thank you for stopping my hand just now, Doctor. But when he spoke of Stephanie that way, I could have killed him just as he killed her.
A very understandable impulse, sir, but one that would have ruined your life.
My life? Now that she is dead, my life is empty. What right do love and beauty have to exist in a world that no longer holds Stephanie? She was all light and life, loveliness. And now... But I am hardly displaying my Viennese blood, am I? The murder is caught, thanks to you, Mr. Holmes, and my life, such as it is, must go on. Somehow.
That's how the story began, Mr. Bartell.
Began? It sounds like the end of a story to me, Doctor.
Far from it, my boy. The next day, Holmes and I had our interview with His Imperial Majesty and learned the nature of the services expected of us. Services that required our leaving the city. And that's why, my boy, we were gone from Vienna for some weeks. We didn't know that during our absence, Herr Howarth's waltz, which had had such a tragic debut, was beginning to make a sort of morbid...
Herr Baron, the Horvath Waltz. We have had many requests for it. Gladly, we will play it, Herr Baron.
Isn't that the Horvath Waltz they are playing?
Yes, my dear, and see who is walking onto the floor to dance to it. Leah Mollenstein, the actress. A beautiful creature.
Are you trying to make me jealous, Hans?
Gott in Himmel, it's Leah Mollenstein! She's been shot!
A new ballet, and to the music of the Horvath Waltz.
Magnificent. Never has Krasnova danced better.
Have you ever seen such exquisite pirouettes?
Six deaths in 4 weeks, Schober. All beautiful women and all killed to the music of the Horvath Waltz. There's a homicidal madman at large in Vienna. There's only one thing to be done. We must forbid absolutely the playing of that waltz by imperial decree.
Hear all of this, Mr. Bartell, until we return to Vienna.
And then, I suppose, Sherlock Holmes was drawn into the case again, Doctor.
Yes, my boy. Holmes immediately made a close study of the newspaper reports on the tragedies, and it was with great difficulty that I tore him away from his investigations to attend the reception at which the Emperor was to thank us for our services on the mission that we just completed. As we arrived at the Imperial Palace, almost the first person we ran into was the Hungarian composer, Janos.
Dr. Watson, you have heard of the tragedies connected with my waltz?
Yes, we have indeed, sir, we have
I was
indeed.
making a close study of the newspaper reports on them just before I came here.
You must do something, Mr. Holmes. People will hardly listen to other music. They want my waltz. But that is forbidden. I'm losing a reputation and a fortune while that waltz remains unplayed.
Or perhaps, Herr Horvath, you are laying an excellent foundation for a later reputation and fortune.
What do you mean?
All this publicity, however distasteful to you at the moment, must in the long run prove invaluable. Ah, there you are, my dear Count Profano.
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I'm glad to see you back in Vienna. You've heard of the murders?
Yes, Count, we were just discussing them.
I need your help again, my good friend. For over a month now, the murder has been at large, and I cannot seem to get on the trail.
Well, I'm Gruning, the first killer. What have you done with him?
Released him.
What?
Released him? Great Scott, why?
At the hearing, it was obvious the man was an egomaniac. He boasted of the murder of Stephanie, apparently out of pure vanity. The liberal newspaper editors made quite an issue of the case. They brought pressure to bear, and we had to let him go.
Confound it. I wish I hadn't left Vienna.
Well, if the fellow's at large again, Country Frana, it's pretty obvious that he's the murderer of the other women, too.
On the contrary, Doctor, he was in prison until yesterday. The last of the murders was committed 3 days ago. Oh, here comes His Imperial Highness, Franz Joseph.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Your Highness.
Good evening.
Your Highness.
Well, I see we have very distinguished company tonight. Not only the masterful Sherlock Holmes and his colleague, Dr. Watson, our English friends that we are honoring, but I see that we have a distinguished representative from our Hungarian Empire, Janos Horváth. A worthy successor, I'm told, is a breed of composers for whom Vienna is famous.
Your Imperial Highness is most kind.
There's a pipe organ in here. It's in excellent condition, I am told. Will you not play as one of your compositions, Herr Horváth?
I shall be most honored, Your Highness.
Sit down, gentlemen, sit down.
Thank you.
What shall I play, Your Imperial Highness?
Anything you wish, young man. Anything you wish.
Thank you, Your Highness. With your permission, I choose to play...
Great heavens! He's playing the Death Waltz.
On your guard, Watson. Even in the Imperial Palace itself, this twirling tune may invoke murder.
You'll hear the rest of Dr. Watson's story in just a second, which just gives me time to remind you that if any one wine could be called the perfect wine for almost any occasion, that one wine would be Petri California Sherry. Petri Sherry is not only a fine before-dinner wine, but it's wonderful after dinner, too. And, of course, when you're entertaining or when guests drop in, whether in the afternoon or evening, there's nothing better than a glass of Petri Sherry. And it's comforting to know that you can serve Petri Sherry proudly, because the name Petri is the proudest name in the history of American wines. Dr. Watson, you certainly left me hanging on a cliff that time. You broke off your story just as the Hungarian composer started to play his ill-fated waltz to the Emperor Franz Joseph. What happened?
At the time, my boy, fortunately, nothing happened. Herr Horváth completed his composition without apparent incident, and shortly afterwards we attended a banquet that was given in our honor. A banquet that concluded with a rather curious ceremony in which the Emperor presented Sherlock Holmes with a medal to commemorate his services. But everything was... never mind about that. Finally, it was shortly after 10 o'clock, I remember. Holmes and I, together with Count Rafrano, left the royal chambers and started to descend the spiral staircase leading to the main hall.
You were greatly honored tonight, Mr. Holmes. I've only known His Imperial Highness to make 3 such presentations before, and they were all to my own countrymen.
He might have made another one. It was about
Please,
it.
Watson, please.
Oh,
The Emperor was most kind. I can't help feeling that he over-evaluated my services.
You're being unusually modest, Holmes.
Perhaps because I feel that my visit here is incomplete until I've solved the Death Waltz murders.
I hope you'll be able to stay in Vienna long enough to do that. I confess I am at my wit's end.
I've been giving the matter a great deal of thought, Count Rafrano. I have a plan for trapping the killer. It's in rather an embryonic stage at the moment, but over a few pipes at the hotel tonight, I expect to develop it thoroughly. I shall call at your office in the morning and explain it to you.
I shall be awaiting your visit eagerly. One more of these murders and the newspaper outcry might become so loud that I should have to resign my post as chief of police.
Well, when Horváth made that daring gesture and played the Death Waltz tonight, it proved one thing. It's not infallible. The death of a beautiful woman doesn't always follow the playing of the melody.
Very true, Doctor, but...
Watson.
Yes, sir?
Strike a match, will you?
Huh?
There's a figure here slumped on the landing.
It's got it. Body of a girl.
And a very beautiful girl, too.
Shot through the forehead. You were wrong, Watson. The Death Waltz is infallible, but I swear to you that the killer has struck for the last time. Ah, there you are, my dear Count Rafrano.
Yes, I followed the instructions you gave me this morning, Mr. Holmes. Schenbaum's is at the moment the smartest restaurant in Vienna. I've reserved the best table for you, and I've invited the guests that you named.
A strangely assorted couple, I must say. Janos Horvath, the composer, and that grinning fellow, the one that admitted shooting your fiancée, Count Rufano.
It's as much as I could do to keep my hands off him when he arrived here, Doctor. But Mr. Holmes insisted that I ask him. Just the same, I wish he would tell me his plan. I'm completely in the dark.
Completely in the dark. I can sympathize with you, Count Rufano. Holmes never tells me a thing either.
Let's join our guest, shall we? In a very few minutes, I'm sure that my plan will be perfectly apparent. Good evening, Herr Horvath.
Oh, good evening, Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson.
How do you do, Herr Holmes?
And how are you tonight, Herr Gröning?
Angry at having to come here against my will. My party does not approve of these aristocratic, padded pigsties. But Count Rufano informed me that if I did not come here tonight, I could expect to find myself back in prison. How could I resist such a persuasive invitation?
Ah, here comes the third guest for our table. I met her at the hotel a few hours ago. Miss Banks, I'm so glad that you were able to come.
Hello, Mr. Holmes. I didn't know this was going to be a party, but I couldn't be happier.
Allow me to present you, Count Rufano, Dr. Watson, Herr Horvath, Herr Gröning, Miss Barbara Banks from the United States of America.
How do you do? Holmes, I wish I knew what you're up to.
And how can a young American girl afford to come to Vienna, may I ask?
Of course you can ask. My father made a lot of money, and he wanted me to have the advantages he never had.
Your father made money because he ground the faces of the poor.
Oh, my father never ground a poor face in his life.
He was a capitalist. I spit on him.
Oh, that's rather unfriendly. And also, geographically speaking, something of a problem. You see, he's living in Wyoming.
You make fun of me.
Only because you made fun of me. Mr. Holmes, I did as you asked me.
I'm very grateful, Miss Banks.
The orchestra leader didn't want to play it. He seemed scared. But I waved a lot of money in front of him, and I promised to pay the fine as well.
Splendid.
Great Scott, I see it all now.
So do I. You persuaded Miss Banks to bribe the orchestra leader to play.
My waltz. My forbidden waltz?
Yes, Herr Horvath. I felt that if the request came from a young American, it might seem quite reasonable.
Particularly if the requests were accompanied by American dollars ground out of the faces of the poor.
You are being unpleasant to me, aren't you?
We're playing at your waltz, however. The Death Waltz.
Mr. Holmes, this is against the law. The Horvath waltz is forbidden by imperial decree.
True, nonetheless, my dear Count, I implore you not to arrest the orchestra leader until after the waltz is completed.
In which case, since I requested it and it's still playing, I'd like a partner. Will you dance with me, Count Rufano?
I'm sorry, Miss Banks, but with this melody I shall never dance again.
Oh, well, how about you, Dr. Watson?
Oh, I like you very much, my dear, but I'm afraid I'm not as light on my feet as I used to be. In any case, I was never much of a hand at the waltz. The polka's more in my line.
Dear me, I'm getting an inferiority complex.
Oh, please do not, Miss Banks. You'll observe that the general public seems singularly unwilling to dance, too. Not one couple has ventured onto the floor.
Oh, can you blame them? The waltz with Horvath may mean death. How can you blame them?
I'm not afraid. After all, Herr Horvath, it's your own music. I'll dance with you.
You're most kind, Miss Banks, and courageous. But to be a partner of the only woman on the floor would mean ruin. An admission of failure.
My third refusal. I'm a wallflower.
No, my dear Miss Banks, the aristocrats, they're afraid. But I, plain, simple Gröning, I will dance with you, Miss Millions.
Oh, bless you, Herr Gröning. And I assure you my father does not grind the faces of the poor.
He does grind the faces of the poor, this I know.
Stop her, it's suicide.
I think not, Herr Horvath.
I think so. And I'll not stay here to watch it.
Where the devil's he off to?
Do not worry, Doctor. I shall keep an eye on him.
Yes, and we'll keep an eye on both of them. Come on, Watson.
Oh, but is leaving the room.
Whereas Count Rufano has deserted his trail and has slipped behind one of those pillars.
Good Lord, he's drawing a revolver.
Exactly, Watson. He's our man. Put down that revolver, Count Rufano. Put it down, I say!
He's turning it on himself. Count Rufano! I still can't believe it, Holmes. Not the fact that Count Rufano blew his brains out, but the fact that he was a murderer.
Yes, I was slow to believe it too, old chap, and I blame myself in consequence. Two things should have been instantly apparent about the madman who killed beautiful women when he heard the Horvath waltz. Firstly, he must have had some motivation which drove him to such an act.
Secondly, he must have carried a revolver with him at all times, since he was invariably armed when the occasion presented itself.
Exactly, and that factor made me think of the police official. Then, of course, I saw Rufano's motivation. He loved the Princess Stephanie dearly. Her death in his arms was a psychological shock that was More than his mentality could stand.
And when he heard that music, it reminded him of the dead princess. It forced him to kill.
That's right, old fellow. You will recall that what he said to us after his fiancée's death. What right do love and beauty have to exist in a world that no longer holds Stephanie? When he heard the music, he couldn't bear to think that other loveliness existed, and so, well, he destroyed it.
But who killed the Princess Stephanie?
The man who was first arrested for it, Herr Gröning. He admitted it after a little persuasion when the police arrived. Taken back to prison in the carriage that just took Count Frano's body.
It's shocking to think that 7 innocent women have been murdered before this case is solved.
Yes, a fact that will be a constant reproach to me, I assure you.
Oh, I didn't mean that, my dear fellow. We weren't even in Vienna when 5 of the killings took place.
Hello. Here comes Miss Banks.
Mr. Holmes, what happened to that funny little man who danced with me?
Herr Gröning? He went to prison, Miss Banks. He was a murderer.
Well, I must say this is a strange kind of a party you asked me to, Mr. Holmes. One of the guests blows his brains out, and the other, the only man who danced with me, turns out to be a murderer. Oh, I see now why Father sent me to Europe. An evening like this could never happen in Wyoming.
Look. Helvet's walking out in front of the orchestra.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Shh. Listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I, Arnold Sorbat, wish to assure you, upon the word of the great English detective Sherlock Holmes, that never again shall my new waltz be an accompaniment for murder. Henceforth, its melody will be for life and love and laughter. I have ordered a bottle of the finest Tokay sent to each of your tables. Raise your glasses and pledge me as I now conduct my waltz. Free at last from the kiss of death.
Say, Doctor, I really like that story. That was a baffler.
Yes, wasn't it? A highly placed police official is the last person in the world you'd think guilty of murder. I must confess I wasn't of so much help to Holmes in solving that case.
Oh, don't let that worry you, Doctor. After all, Holmes almost missed solving it himself.
Oh, thank you, my boy. Very nice of you. Thank you very much. But it certainly was one of the most interesting cases that I was ever connected with.
I know what you mean. You know, I came across quite an interesting case myself the other day.
Oh, you don't say where?
Right in my own house.
Oh, that's interesting. What kind of case?
Sherry.
Oh, good gracious me.
That's right, a case of Petri, California sherry. You see, I buy it by the case, Doctor, because that Petri wine is really extraordinary. But all Petri wine is unusual wine, unusually good, because the Petri family has been making wine for generations. Because this is so, and because the Petri business has been owned and operated by the Petri family ever since its beginning, and is today the largest independent family-owned wine company in America, naturally the name Petri on a bottle of wine is more than a trademark. It's the personal assurance of the Petri family that every drop of wine in that bottle is good wine. Naturally good wine because Petri took time to bring you good wine.
Come in.
Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Mr. Bartell. Here. Quiet with it. Down, Monty. Down there.
Dogs seem very chipper tonight.
Yes, tonight, yes, but they've been in disgrace most of the day, Mr. Bartell.
Oh? What have they been up to? After the seals again, Doctor?
No, my boy, this time it was chickens. They got into my neighbor's coop and had a delightful time. Fortunately, there were no casualties, but I'm afraid that my good neighbor policy has suffered a slight diplomatic strain. But you come here to listen to Sherlock Holmes' adventures, not those of my dog, so draw up your usual chair and make yourself comfortable, and I'll get on with tonight's story.
Last week, Doctor, you told us it was a case in which Sherlock Holmes found the solution without ever meeting any of the suspects.
That's quite correct, Mr. Bartell. As remarkable an exhibition of long-distance detection as I ever recall. But judge the story for yourself, my boy. It was in the autumn of 1903, and Sherlock Holmes was about to retire to his bee farm on the Sussex Downs. I must confess, Mr. Bartell, that my heart was heavy during those last few weeks we spent at Baker Street. I thought of the countless adventures that we'd shared together. I remembered those many evenings of quiet comradeship and companionship. A fire blazing away in the hearth as Holmes lay back in the shadows playing his beloved violin. And then, Mr. Bartell, as so often happened, There'd be a violent jangle on our doorbell, and some wretched soul in misery would be standing before us and pouring out his troubles. Suddenly the violin would be discarded, and Holmes the dreamer would become Holmes the man of action. Come, Watson, the game's afoot, he'd say. And in a few moments later, we'd be rattling off in a cab through the foggy, gaslit London streets.
Yes, Doctor, I can imagine it was pretty hard for you to leave Baker Street.
It was, Mr. Bartell. However, as it transpired, there was one more adventure awaiting us before we left. A few days before the actual move, I persuaded Holmes to take an afternoon off from his packing and accompany me on a visit to the laboratory of an old friend of mine, a Professor Jean Boulin. He was an eminent French scientist engaged in very important work at the London University. Well, by the way, this was at a period, Mr. Bartell, when radium was something extremely new and extremely rare. The university had just acquired a minute but invaluable portion of the element, and Professor Boulin was in charge of the research connected with it. I can remember the picture so well, as Holmes stood in the laboratory, talking with keen interest.
Quite amazing. Think that this tiny leaden vessel contains one of the most precious substances in the world.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. We have a great deal to thank Madame Curie for. This new element may force us entirely to revise our concepts of all physical structure.
Your research is a great responsibility, Boulin.
It is, Watson. Though I must confess that I wish the authorities here would give me a freer hand. I foresee such infinite possibilities in the use, particularly the medical use of radium. But my conservative superiors seem to regard it only as a toy, a scientific curiosity.
Limit your experiments accordingly, I suppose.
Exactly. I'm given no opportunity to do anything that's in the least radical.
Must be very disheartening. How can research ever get anywhere along those lines?
It is a great misfortune, Holmes, that you've determined to retire to your bee farm. This project we could use such an analytical mind as yours.
You flatter me, Professor.
How many assistants do you have working with you, Boulin?
3, but none of them are very inspired, I'm afraid.
What?
My best assistant is a man named Barker. He's a little on the conservative side, too, but he is extremely adroit. The other 2, a young man called Taylor and the girl Gladys Hughes. They mean well, but gauche, I fear, is the only word to describe them.
Why do you laugh, Boulin?
I was just amused to observe that in describing my assistants, I chanced to be literal as well as figurative. It's odd that random symbolism can sometime, but never mind that. You would like to see the rest of the laboratory?
Yes, indeed we would.
Thank you very much.
I have some extraordinarily interesting photographic plates that record the emanations of radium. They're over here. I think you will find them most fascinating.
Baker Street, particularly when our rooms are full of packing cases, seems rather drab after the scientific stimulations of Professor Boulin's laboratory, isn't it, old chap?
Yes, it seemed drab even if we hadn't been to see him. I feel frightfully depressed, Holmes. I just don't know what I'm going to do without you.
Oh, you're still a young man, Watson, and a susceptible one. You'll marry again.
No, I won't.
Yes, you will, old chap. And you'll end up by being glad that your old roommate, your difficult, rather unsociable old roommate, is living in retirement on the Sussex Downs.
Rubbish. I shan't feel anything of the kind. In any case, I don't think you will be able to stay in retirement for long. Your mind is much too alert to be satisfied by being a sort of midwife to a bunch of beastly bees.
Oh, dear Watson. I feel that you'll never eat honey again.
Yes, you can laugh, Holmes, but I could see how excited you were when Booth suggested that you might help him with his radium experiment.
Flattering suggestion, I must admit, my dear fellow. Just the same, Oh, now, who the devil's that?
From the urgency of the tug on the bell pull, I'd say that it was a client.
And go and head him off, will you, old chap?
Yes, I'll do my best.
Oh, Watson, explain that I'm no longer in practice.
Too late, Holmes. He's brushed past Mrs. Hudson. Here he comes rushing up the stairs.
Oh, confound it.
I beg your pardon, sir.
You
but,
Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
No, I am not Sherlock.
Then you must be Mr. Holmes.
That is my name, sir. But may I ask what accounts for your rather whirlwind entrance? My housekeeper, Mrs. Hudson...
I haven't any time to consider etiquette. My sister Gladys Hughes has vanished. Vanished into thin air. You've got to find her for me, Mr. Holmes. I'll pay you any fee you name, but you've got to find her.
Mr. Hughes, I'm extremely sorry that your sister has vanished, but I'm afraid that I can do nothing to help you. I'm retiring. I'm giving up my practice.
If you won't help me, I'll go to someone who will.
That's exactly what I mean, sir. I suggest that you go to the police, or if you insist on a private investigator, I can strongly recommend Mr. Martin Hewitt. Yes, his address is 39 Pont Street, Knightsbridge.
Good day to you.
Good day, Mr. Hughes.
36 Pont Street, Knightsbridge.
Yes, I can understand his concern, but his manners leave a great deal to be desired.
Holmes. Gladys Hughes, his missing sister. That was the name of one of Professor Boulin's assistants, wasn't it?
True, old fellow, but it's probably only a coincidence.
What?
Both Christian and surnames are extremely common ones.
Well, I have a feeling that it may not be a coincidence.
Oh, come now, my dear fellow. Don't you try and embroil me in a fresh adventure. I've retired and I'm leaving for Sussex in a few days. And if any more clients come wrenching at my doorbell, I shall ignore them.
But, Mr. Holmes, you've got to help me. My son, Geoffrey Barker, has disappeared.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Barker, but I'm afraid I'm...
Holmes, Geoffrey Barker was the name of Professor Boulin's chief assistant.
Watson, please believe me when I say that I am not to be inveigled into any further... Mrs. Taylor, I'm sorry, but I can't help you.
Oh, but Mr. Holmes, it's my husband. He's disappeared. We've only been married 3 months, and now, it's terrible. I've been so worried ever since he started to work on that strange new radium with Professor Jean Ballon.
Holmes, you can't pretend it's coincidence any longer. Gladys Hughes, Geoffrey Barker, and now Taylor. The 3 assistants of Professor Boulin.
I know it, Watson. Mrs. Taylor, the moving van will be here tomorrow to take my things to Sussex. I shall follow them immediately. I have retired, madam. Do you understand that? Retired.
Yes, another telegram for you, Holmes.
That'll be the 4th today. Why won't Scotland Yard leave me alone?
Well, it's a pretty strange business. 3 people engaged in research of this new element radium have all disappeared within 48 hours. Scotland Yard needs your help.
Let them earn their salaries, my dear Watson. I've helped them for the last time. Well, let's see how they've couched their latest effusion. Oh, this isn't from Scotland Yard. It's from my brother, Mycroft.
Mycroft? What's he going to say?
Listen to this. Now Professor Boulin has disappeared.
Great Scott.
And the radium with him. Surely the pattern is obvious, Sherlock. Radium must be found, could solve the problem for you, but I'm too lazy. Consider what a flashy case for you to retire on. Regards, Mycroft. The old devil.
Holmes, this is shocking. My old friend Boulin has disappeared.
Yes, Watson, and now my brother asks me to investigate. The pressure becomes irresistible. Very well, I bow to fate and postpone my retirement for a few hours.
Good man, Holmes. You know you'll never really retire.
Now, let me see. As Mycroft says, there's an obvious pattern in this case. Our first step, of course, will be to interview all the doctors who treat patients without charge.
Why?
Well, surely that's obvious.
Well, it isn't at all obvious to me. I don't know why you always leave me in the dark.
Well, what makes you laugh?
Being left in the dark. It's just like the old times, isn't it, Holmes? Come on, old fellow, let's go. The game's afoot. Dr. MacDonald, this is Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes. I'm very glad to meet you.
And are you, Dr. MacDonald?
I swear that I've never been in as many doctors' offices as I have today. But Mr. Holmes is in search of some information. Perhaps, Doctor, you can help him.
I'll do my best. What do you want to know, Mr. Holmes?
Whether you have any charity patients with skin eruptions or growths of any kind. I mean, patients that have not kept their appointments recently, perhaps.
Now, let me see. Why, yes, I do. Old Mrs. Pendle. She has a very bad case of lupus. She was due for a treatment here yesterday, and I've seen nothing of her.
Splendid. Can you give me her address?
Why, certainly. It's in my book here.
Well, I hope this isn't a false trail, Holmes.
We can only explore it and see, dear chap.
Here we are. Mrs. Pendle, 36 Elm Gardens, Clapham.
Mrs. Pendle, 36 Elm Gardens, Clapham. Thank you, Doctor. I'm greatly obliged to you. Getting restless, Watson?
Yes, I am a little. We've been waiting outside Mrs. Pendle's house for over an hour. Why don't we knock on the door? See if she's at home.
Oh, no, my dear chap. We mustn't frighten her. I hope that she's going to lead us to our quarry. You see...
Shh. Front door's opening. The woman's coming out.
Yes, it's Mrs. Pendle, beyond doubt. Look at that bandage around the upper part of her face.
Yeah, hello, she's turning down the street. We're going to follow her, I suppose.
Naturally, but let's give her a start, shall we? We don't want her to spot us.
Well, while we're waiting, perhaps you'll clear up 1 or 2 points for me. I'm still very much in the dark.
With pleasure, old chap. What puzzles you?
Well, one of the things that
Come on.
What?
We've given her enough of a start. Let's follow her.
Oh, very well. But look here, you asked me what I didn't understand. 2 things puzzle me. What did Mycroft mean by the pattern of the case? Why are we following a poor sick old lady through the London streets?
I'll answer the first question, and I think the answer to the second will be self-apparent. The pattern of the case is clear. Professor Boulin and his 3 assistants have vanished together with the radium, but their disappearances were not simultaneous. Had they been so, it would have been a transparent case of theft. But with the disappearances gradual rather than simultaneous, the emphasis has been subtly shifted.
Yes, I can see that, Holmes, but what do you suppose is at the back of the whole business? Can't be a simple case of theft. Radium is enormously valuable, but it'd be hard stuff to sell again.
Not to an unscrupulous criminal with a knowledge of medicine, Watson. My own theory, and I admit at the moment that it's purely a theory, is that Professor Boulin was worried because he was so hampered in his research. You'll remember that he stressed his great faith in the medical values of the new element, radium.
Yes, he did.
It's more than possible that he places the rights of science above the rights of property, that he's determined that he and his group will carry on their invaluable research unhampered by the conservative restraints of the university.
I see what you mean, Holmes, but how does Mrs. Pendle, the poor woman that we're following, enter the picture?
Because one of the chief lines of radium research on the continent so far has been with her sort of trouble. Professor Boulin's obvious move, if my theory is correct, would be to contact poverty-stricken patients, promise them relief, induce them to abandon their regular treatments, and submit to him.
By Jove, yes, Holmes, that seems perfectly logical, and yet I can't believe that Boulin would...
Mrs. Pendleton has reached her destination. She's turned down a driveway.
Yes, she's walking up to what looks like a deserted warehouse.
Hurry, old chap. Don't let her out of our sight.
She's opened the door without knocking. She's gone in.
We'll wait here for a moment or two, then we'll follow her. I have a feeling that your old friend, Professor Boulin, is not far away, Watson.
Yes, you're probably right. But I hope we can do something to protect him from the consequences of what he's done. It might easily mean the finish of a brilliant career.
I'll do everything in my power, but you know as well as I do...
Shh, look. Mrs. Pendle's coming out again.
Yes, and she's in trouble. Come on. Mrs. Pendle, what's wrong?
I don't know how you know my name or who you be, but you ask me what's wrong. They tell me to come here to this address, and I find a doctor who'd help my face. I comes here, and what do I find?
What did you find, madam?
A corpse, sir. That's what I find. A dead man lying there in a great pool of his own blood.
Well, Dr. Watson, so following the tracks of old Mrs. Pendle led you to a corpse, huh?
Yes, Mr. Bartell. Of course, Sherlock Holmes and I went at once into the broken-down warehouse to examine the scene of the tragedy. Slumped over a desk in a dark and shabby room, a flickering candle giving a macabre lighting to the scene, was the body of a man. I think I knew its identity even before Holmes turned to me.
Professor Boulin, all right, Watson.
Good devil. Murdered, of course.
Yes, but examine him for yourself, will you?
Yes. Yes, there's no doubt about it. This wound couldn't have been self-inflicted. The right auricle of the heart has been pierced.
How long ago would you estimate death took place?
Not more than a couple of hours ago, I should say.
Not hard to reconstruct the killing. The murderer came up from behind Boulin as he sat here, crooked an arm around his throat. Yes. See the finger marks on the right-hand side of the neck? Here? Then stabbed him in the chest.
And then withdrew the weapon and disappeared.
Leaving no traces, confound it. A dusty room is an ideal place for recording footprints, but there are half a dozen different prints here, including Mrs. Pendle's. Hello. Here's the print of a smaller woman's shoe.
Well, must be that of Gladys Hughes, his assistant.
Undoubtedly, but that really proves nothing except that she was here with him. In fact, that we were convinced of anyway. Question is, go on. Let's go outside and talk to Mrs. Pendle again.
Poor old Boulin. What a shocking way to die.
And what a great loss to science.
I suppose the murderer must have stolen the radium. We found no trace of it in there.
Undoubtedly, the possession of the radium was the motive for the murder. Mrs. Pendle.
The poor man is dead, ain't he, sir?
I'm afraid so, madam.
I knew it. I never should have come here. I never should have left Dr. MacDonald.
Mrs. Pendle, let me ask you a question.
I can't be answering no questions, sir. I don't know nothing about how the poor soul got himself murdered. What would a poor woman like me know about such things?
No, my good woman. My friend isn't suggesting at all that you know anything about the murder.
Then what do you want to know, sir?
Who told you to come to this address today, Mrs. Pendle?
A young lady. Nice young lady she was, too. She met me coming out of Dr. MacDonald's yesterday and told me that if I come here today, I'd find a doctor who could cure me.
Yeah, that was obviously Miss Hughes. Holmes, I believe that your theory was right.
Come on, Mrs. Pendle. We'll escort you to the nearest police station where you can report the murder.
Yes, sir.
And then, Watson, we must keep on the track of the radium. That, perhaps, is more important than any life.
Well, how are we going to do that? We haven't a clue to go on.
Remember that Professor Boulin's 3 assistants are still missing. We must go to the homes of each of them and see what can be found out. Mr. Hughes, you must realize by now that your sister's disappearance is part of something vastly more significant than you think. I must ask you in the
My
first...
sister didn't disappear, Mr.
What do you mean, sir? You came to us and said that you had.
Oh, it was all a mistake, gentlemen. She came back today. She'd just been down to the seaside for a short rest, and she'd forgotten to let me know. I'm sorry to have bothered you.
May I see your sister at once, please?
I'm sorry, Mr. Holmes, but she's out just now. I don't know where she's gone or what time she'll be back.
Mrs. Barker, I've come to you about your son's disappearance. I'm afraid that...
But my son didn't disappear, Mr. Holmes. It was all misunderstanding. He came home today.
Then may we speak to him, please, Mrs. Barker?
Oh, I'm afraid that's impossible. You see, he...
Mrs. Taylor, I want to talk to you about your husband's disappearance.
Oh, that. He came home this afternoon, Mr. Holmes. At first I was so suspicious, but when he explained, well, I'm sure you know how it is in the first few months of marriage, those little tips.
Confound it, Watson. We are no nearer the solution.
And meanwhile, here we are back in Baker Street to find that the moving van has taken all your things off to Sussex. Perhaps you should give up the case, Holmes, and follow them.
Close my career on a note of failure? No, my dear fellow. I shall not leave London until this problem is solved.
Oh, in that case, I'll sit down. Looks to me as if it may prove a lengthy wait.
I've rarely felt more frustrated, Watson. All 3 vanished technicians home safely with plausible stories, or at least plausible alibis, and poor Boulin murdered, the radium stolen.
Well, I must say it makes no sense to me.
But it must make sense. The pattern was well enough to find in the beginning. It's just a question of finding the right key. In a way, it's clear enough what's happened. One of the 3 assistants, placing the financial value of radium above its value to science, murdered Boulin to obtain the prize. The other 2, fearing that their complicity in the original plot would involve them as accomplices in murder, ran home and established an alibi.
And the murderer did the same thing, for it's obvious one of the 3 must be the killer and the thief.
Yes, the question is, which one of the 3 is the culprit?
If only poor Boulin were alive, he could help us.
My dear chap, if Boulin were alive, there would be no murderer.
Oh, of course it wouldn't.
Now, let's see. Boulin gave us a few bare facts about his 3 assistants. I wonder... But of course, Watson! I have the answer. The case is solved.
What do you mean, Holmes? How can it be solved? You haven't done enough investigation. If it comes to that, you haven't even seen any of your 3 suspects.
That isn't necessary.
Oh, you know who did it?
Yes, Watson, and so should you.
But we know nothing to set them apart from each other, except that one of them's a girl.
We know more than that, my dear fellow. Think hard.
Well, Boulin told us that Geoffrey Barker was an excellent technician, while the other 2 were somewhat clumsy.
We know even more than that.
Well, I'm just if I know what, Holmes.
I shan't even need to stay in London and follow the case through to its logical conclusion. A telegraph to Mycroft and another to Scotland Yard to take care of it, yes. And I can be in Sussex before the moving van, after all.
You mean you're going now, before the case is solved?
But it is solved, my dear fellow. All that remains to be done is some purely routine work. What's the time?
Look at... just 3 o'clock.
Splendid. If we hurry, we can catch the 3:45 express from Waterloo.
We?
Yes, I was counting on you spending a few days down there with me, old chap. I hope you can spare the time. I should hate to make so drastic a change without my good old friend Watson at my side.
Oh, of course. I'm delighted, but
what, my dear boy?
The case of the disappearing scientists.
Wait until we get to Sussex, shall we? As soon as I get an answer to my telegrams, I'll explain the whole thing to you. And now let's hurry, shall we? Our train leaves in 40 minutes. More tea, Watson?
Thanks, old boy.
Peaceful down here, isn't it?
Extremely. At the moment, I must confess, I find it rather nerve-wracking.
Oh, why?
You know why, Holmes. I want you to open that telegram and tell me if your solution to the The Boulin case was the correct one.
Very well, my dear chap. Let's see. What is it? It's Mycroft. Listen. Murderer arrested and radium recovered. Well done, Sherlock, though you took longer than I expected. Regards, Mycroft.
Congratulations, Holmes. And now perhaps you'll condescend to tell me how you solved it.
Don't be angry with me, old chap. I only wanted to make sure that my solution was correct. You remember the nature of the fatal wound on Boulin's body?
Of course. He'd been stabbed through the right auricle of the heart.
From behind. Proving that the murderer was clearly right-handed.
Oh, what does that signify? Almost everybody's right-handed.
Oh, no, not in this case. If you recall, Professor Boulin said that Geoffrey Barker was adroit, while his other two assistants were gauche. Then he laughed because he said his remark was true both literally and figuratively.
I still don't see what I was talking about.
Oh, come now, Watson, come. Think of the origin of the word adroit. Ardois. Droit is the French word for right.
And gauche is the word for left.
Meaning the two gauche assistants were left-handed, and therefore only the adroit, the right-handed Barker, could have inflicted the fatal wound.
I see it now, Holmes. You know, if you'd remembered that mark of Boulin's at the time we found his body, you could have solved the case much sooner.
That's true, old fellow, very true. And when my old friend Watson points out that my memory is failing and my mind sluggish, then I know that my retirement has been postponed for far too long.
Well, so Holmes really went through with his idea of becoming a bee farmer.
Yes, of course. It became one of his favorite hobbies. Do you know anything about the raising of bees?
Oh, nothing at all. The only connection I've ever had with bees was very remote. Once I had the hives.
Once you had the... Oh, no, Mr. Barker.
Oh, yes, Dr. Watson.
Mates, got to love this episode. The twists and turns of the Waltz of Death. Boy, yo, that guy was a crack shot with the gun. And then to turn the gun on himself, goodness, just awful. And the scientist disappearing to only return, where the clue was in the dialogue of the victim the whole time. Gotta love these classics. Mates, I remastered this episode with a new tool in my toolset, and that tool was only possible thanks to those that donate. First up is my Ode Night D-Titan, my Queen of Cats, and the Queen of my support, Maya. Thanks to you, I put money aside each month to purchase Neutron Elements 3, which allows me to equalize the audio in a very, very special way. It uses artificial intelligence to understand the audio, build an audio landscape as it were, so that I can then massage and tweak the audio to give you listeners the best experience. Very, very cool and very, very powerful. Thank you, you legend. You're truly a godsend, Maya. I'm lucky to have you. My White Tea Warlord, Leza of Loxley. Mate, thanks to your support, I've been grabbing myself some sound bites, audio, and music of all genres to continue to build a database of fantastic audio for my upcoming episodes. This Wednesday will be testimony for new music and sounds. Thank you, man. You're absolutely fantastic, and I hope you're doing great. And my second White Tea Warlord, Paige Kramer, my Crystal Warden. Mate, thank you, Paige, for your lovely emails and comms, as always. Thanks to you, I'm able to invest in Soundcrate and more stings and special effects subscriptions. All donations put to good use, of course. I'm also going to be putting to good use the money for some artwork and design for the podcast. It's going to be a riot. Thank you so, so much, mate. You're bloody marvelous. And my Earl Grey enforcers I am lucky to have. Just Heather, Juicebox Andy, Peter Raffaele, Dolphin and Cow, Michelangelo Yacone, Divided by Zero, and Leah Fassig. Thank you, you legends. If you want to support the show as well, visit my Patreon, which I mentioned in the intro of the show, and if you want to reach out to me, as some of you lovelies do, you can email me at storiesfablesghostlytales@gmail.com. Share your own stories, make recommendations, say hi, don't be shy, and I promise you'll hear from me. Thank you, you lovelies. See you Wednesday, and as always, till next we meet.